Finding your identity in service and after service. Guys, have you ever looked in the mirror and asked yourself, who is staring back at me? You know, we wear the uniform, or we wore the uniform, and we essentially had our identity assigned to us. And sometimes, despite that uniform, we still don't know who we are. Maybe you're not who you thought you would be. Maybe you're not where you thought you would be by this time. You know, maybe there have been things that are you've done incredibly impressive things, but you've also followed those by things you're far from proud of, which creates this internal conflict and leads you to ask the question, who am I? I just want you guys to know you're not alone. Our guest today is going to help us unpack his journey to discovering who he is, despite being defined by the military and society of who he should have been or he should be. There was a struggle in this story, but there is also a victory in this story. Welcome to the Military Wire with Mike Schindler. This is the podcast where we interview America's most elite men and women who have served this country. We share their stories of overcoming, their proven lessons in leadership, and their journey to finding mission and purpose. Our guest today led a dual life, and one where he battled with his dual identity. Gary Villanueva's training in special operations is extensive. He retired from 1st Special Forces Group out of Fort Lewis, Washington, in 1999 at the rank of E8 Master Sergeant. But what's interesting about that is he had no combat tours at that point. But then he became an activated retiree. Operation Enduring Freedom, Iraq, called him out of retirement and back into service in the 1st Special Forces Group, 2008-2009. As he states, in the rear with no gear, still no combat tour. He finished 21 years of service in the United States Army, Operation Iraqi Freedom Veteran, 6 years as Special Forces Operations Sergeant, Coordinating Detachment. 8 years as Special Forces Medical Sergeant, specializing in combat trauma management. 6 years as Special Forces Engineering Sergeant, specializing in military explosives, built theater, construction, and fortifications. And then he became self-employed. If you should ever meet Gary in person, you'll find him to be kind, focused, passionate, and incredibly transparent. But his biggest fight wasn't in theater. His biggest fight was with himself. And today he helps men and families win those battles. Gary, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mr. Mike. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when you and I first met, and I really want our audience to get to know you, and we've got such a short period of time to do this, but you know, before we dive into the topic of how you found your identity, I want you to share with our listeners your journey. Now, I know Gary, it spans 21 years, so you got to give us the clip notes on this, but I really want our audience to understand why you joined and what attracted you to special operations.
You know, I mean, to be honest, you know, I mean, growing up, I grew up in Southern California, grew up in a family of 6. Really, other than Billy Jack, you know, who, I mean, you know, badass, and you know, but I really had no clue.
Yeah.
I know I wanted to be a man, and a huge driving factor of that goal was my father. You know, my father was a hard man. He was a hard-working man, a disciplinarian, and a hard drinker. I can recall when I was like, I believe, 10, 12 years old. I have 2 older brothers, but I remember when my oldest brother put his fist up to my father. And my father laughed at him. Oh, you think you're a man now? That day I purposed 2 things in my heart. 1, I never want to raise my hands at my father. 2, I never want to call myself a man to be laughed at.
Yeah.
And so, you know, with that, you know, some of the things that my father told my brothers and I, that you will never be a man in my house. You will never be a man in my house. Wow. And he said, it's not until you pay for the food in your belly, the clothes on your back, and the shoes on your feet. And you know, for that, I thank my father. And then the other thing he said, that join the military. That'll make a man out of you. So I joined the military, not knowing. I didn't even know what airborne was, jumping out of airplanes. You know, and then once I signed up, oh well, you know, I guess this is what I'll do. And so that's a really short story of how I got into special operations.
No kidding. So You touch on something, Gary, that I want to unpack a little bit, because there's a void, I think, in America that's going on right now, and that's father power and the influence of male figures in many young men's lives. And you describe a father that was very hard. And when he said to you those words, join the military, that'll make a man out of you, what image did you have of a man? I mean, was it your father or was it something different?
It was my father. My father was a physical man. But then again, in its totality, I went through this program, Quest for Authentic Manhood. And in the program, the question is asked, what is a man? And you asked me what I thought a man was 50 years ago, 40, 30, 20, 10, 5. Today, my definition has changed and changed drastically. And so, but my father was huge, and I thank my father, and I told him that prior to his passing that, I thank you. It was my father who taught me how to shake a man's hand. It was my father that taught me when the going gets tough, the tough get going. It was my father that taught me the value of a hard day's work. It was my father that taught me patriotism to my country. And it was my father that taught me reverence for the Lord, different than my mother who taught me my faith.
Wow. There's so many angles we could take on this topic, and I just want to keep this going because you've got a special story, Gary, that I think will influence and impact, listeners to the point where they start to seek, who do they need to have in their life to go ahead and help shape who they want to become. And I think that's so important. The military helped shape you. Your father obviously helped influence you, your mother too. And you became part of special ops. Your quote, in the rear with a gear, still no combat tour. But when you and I met, you talked about this dual life that you led.
Yeah.
Share what you meant by that, because I know in the military sometimes we have to be one person forward facing and we're a different person behind closed doors. But what does that mean to you?
Yeah. I think deep down, every guy in special ops questions his status as a man, as an elite warrior. Personally, I think you could take any individual who is confident in his skill, a pro athlete, a tradesman who's at the top of his craft, a doctor, an engineer, and you move them outside their comfort zone and then add a little instructor heat, and there's a lot that will fold. And as to the dual life, I don't know when, where, how, or who, but somebody in special operations, some guy set the bar of manliness, and you either operate above the bar, and you get a beer and a slap on the back, and welcome to the club, and you operate below the bar, and you're laughed at, you're shunned, you're not part of the manly club. So in the military, me, and I know a lot of guys, you learn to put on this facade of confidence, and, you add a swagger to your walk, but deep down, you're barely surviving, hoping no one will discover your weakness. And so, and because of that manliness that, that you have to try and build up, it comes at a price. And it's almost like you have to feed it daily, either through, some sort of physical performance, drinking, or womanizing. And it's usually a combination of all the above.
Yeah.
And that takes its toll on the family in one form or another.
So were you trying to fill kind of this hole in your soul through this experience, Gary? When somebody says special ops, the world, salutes you, right? Because you are really the tip of the spear. You're doing things that most don't, and most who are even in the military don't. And so you really are the tip of the spear. You are the epitome of manhood. You are the epitome of a warrior. And yet you're describing still this hole in your soul that's being filled by, alcohol, women, physical, exercises.
Wellness. Yeah. And again, I don't know who set that bar. And yet, you're always, it's like you always have to feed it. You always have to perform. And it's, and it's just, opposite of what drives me now, because for me, the military does not define me as a man. And yet back then, again, the life that when we'd go TDY and, what goes TDY stays TDY, and, you just learn to live this dual life. I mean, I could look at my wife. I could come home after a deployment. I could look at my wife and just lie, straight lie. And again, it was just, it helped to, feed that what I thought was a man. And the wife, the family, they don't understand. And yet, as I've come to learn now that, no, it doesn't have to be that way. And I know, and I mean, I've lived it, that it comes at a price. Your family does suffer, and I look at what me going overseas and living that dual life and drinking, womanizing, and what does that really have to do with my family? And yet, there were areas. Just the thought that came, is kind of like the, biblical characters, David and Bathsheba, Ammon and Tamar. What if both those women were seduced in the same way? It talks about Ammon being stronger than Tamar, but yet, strength, that's a given. But what if he was stronger in wooing? And I tell you, that's one thing we learn to do, is we learn to woo people. And yet, when I come home, there were aspects of where I needed to discipline, especially my son, and yet I did not. And down the road, I don't believe in generational cursings, but I do believe in generational habits. And I get to see it, and it hurts. I have a good friend who we served in the military. His son's a heroin addict. Mm. And yet, I'm helping him. I'm helping his son because, we invest so much into this military lifestyle. And I mean, it's one thing to serve our country to protect our country. And yet it's the after activities that we engage in that do affect our families.
Yeah, you're describing that there is a price to be paid for freedom. And it's not always the ultimate sacrifice, which is, death, but there are other sacrifices that are made, which is very difficult. And I'm sure some of our listeners are going to be impacted by this because they're living it or they know people who have lived it. Gary, there might be some that, you and I would probably say won't accept your story because, we're violating the code, right? We're sharing things that should never be shared.
Exactly.
That, no, that doesn't in fact happen. And, Gary, you just, you got to embrace the suck, and it's part of the, it's part of the drill. You just, we don't talk about it. What happens, stays behind closed doors. But I think the victory of your story is you worked through this dual life. I mean, you struggled through it. Your wife struggled through it. Your family struggled through it. But you got to the point, how did you break these chains of this dual identity and discover who you really are?
I can honestly say that, I mean, I know I didn't. And I don't think I know anyone who can, at least not on their own or their own power. For me, it was a process that, my Lord and Savior God took me through. And for the most part, it takes me back to the start. I mean, and I have these reoccurring thought thingies that go through my head that take me back to when I was a youngster, and I could see the little things that really kind of, for lack of better words, wounded my heart, and you try and you don't want anyone to see those things or those wounds, and yet again, so often in living in life, they pop up. But for me, it was just, I think that, slowly as the Lord worked on my heart, and it again, it's painful.
Yeah.
It's painful.
So it's a journey.
Yes, it was a journey back, and basically, it's almost like the Lord stripping away all those things that I thought were manliness. And that was so neat. In going through the Quest for Authentic Manhood series, which is by Robert Lewis series, I could see my grandfather with my father. I could see my father with me with my son. And yet, as you know, as we start to strip away those things that I thought were important, and especially, you know, in the military, starting to strip away those things, and that I believe that, you know, I remember my brother, he hears the Lord in a different way than I do, but I remember my brother asking the Lord, "What are you doing with me?" The answer that he gave my brother was, "I want to introduce you to someone you don't know, but it's who you are, who God made you to be. It's this foundation of a man that he built before we were born." And so, going through that process, and it was just little by little. Sometimes, I mean, sometimes it hurts way more than others, and you know, just reconciling the past.
You know, Gary, you're talking about that age-old question of, you know, essentially how I started this was, you know, have you ever looked in the mirror, right, and asked, who is looking back at me, right? That process that we go through as men and women of understanding, why do we even exist, right? What's our purpose here on this earth? Because you and I both know that we are on this earth to serve a purpose, right? We're just not here out of accident.
Right.
And so that quest, and you talk about something, you talk about this quest for authentic manhood, this series. Would you recommend that that's something that everybody should go through, every man that is seeking?
You know, there's parts of that program that may be considered a little cheesy.
Yeah.
But in general, you know, any one of those programs, you know, there's several programs. There's the King Warrior Servant Lover series, and I think any of those programs that, you know, the Lord's going to start a process, and you know, your process is different than my process, is different than, you know, another individual's process, and so I just think getting into some program, and the Lord's going to start to unpack, and you know, go ahead.
Yeah. What if you don't believe in the Lord? Like, you know, I mean, I know you have brothers and sisters like, listen, you know what? I gave up on God when I saw the things I saw or did the things I did. Is it still applicable to them, knowing that, you know, God can work on their heart no matter where they go or what they do, right? But if I were not a believer, is this still something that I should take on?
I would highly, I'd highly advise it, because again, what if, I mean, for me, I know the picture I had of a man was not right.
Yeah.
You know? And so what if, you know, whoever's out there, what if your concept, what if your thought process of what a man is wrong?
Yeah.
You know, and I used to think that you know, I mean, if you're afraid of God, or, well, he wants to change, you know, he wants to, you know, totally free to change. No, I mean, for me, what I've deduced is I really feel the number one thing that the Lord wants to change in me. He doesn't want to change my character. He put that into me. He doesn't want to change my personality. That's unique. And yet the one thing that I think the Lord does want to change in my life is my concept of love. Because it is in that concept of love that I can, again, going back to that king, warrior, servant lover. We all want to be the status of a king to be recognized as being elevated. And of course, for us who are in the military, to be a warrior, to be that gallant warrior.
Yeah.
And some may not understand what it means to be a servant, but in being a servant, there's so much joy. To be somebody's right-hand man, and to know that supervisor, that commander, whatever it is, who looks on you and just like with these eyes of that, I couldn't do this without you, my right-hand man. You are the man. And so, this is what these programs help to unpack. And then on the other side is lover. What does it really mean to love? And my world has been, on these concepts has been turned upside down.
This is such a journey, and you're still, to your point, you're still working through the process of, and I think in many ways all of us, struggle with this dual life. Even those that, seem like they have it all together, there's still that inner voice that is making us question. What is that one piece of advice you would give anyone who is transitioning or who has transitioned that would aid them in discovering their post-service identity?
I'd say number one, realize that it's going to be painful, but don't be so quick to run for the anesthetic. Don't run away. Don't try to put yourself in a new situation. It will follow. It will follow.
Yeah.
And for me, I got to a point where I stopped asking why. And for me, it's asking the Lord, why? And it's not so much asking why. Okay, what? Yeah. What is it you want me to learn? Because and sometimes it's just. I mean, I don't claim to hear the audible voice of the Almighty, but there's times where I just feel Him telling my heart, my conscience, shut up, suck it up, be a man, and love. Love your wife, love your family. You do the right things. And as far as I think one of the things that helped me, and the process that I went through, is going back and embarking on your mistakes. I mean, why do we? Success is not always a good teacher. I mean, I put that. I served 1 year as a team sergeant. I mean, that's the ultimate position in special operations or special forces. Yeah. I mean, if as I like to, tell individuals, if you look up if you look up in the dictionary, bad team sergeant, my picture's right there because I failed miserably.
But you learned failures, right? There was no question for those.
Well, the thing about it is that after that 1 year, I tell you one thing I did do. I was able to call up 5 of my old team sergeants, and I apologized to them. I said, I am so sorry. I never realized what a boob I was until I had people like me that I had to supervise, that I had to lead. And it's no. I mean, in Ranger School, when I went to Ranger School, there's a peer reporting system. I mean, you can pass all your graded exercises, but by same token, if your classmates say you're a dud, you're out of there. Yeah. When I went to Ranger School, the first 2 peer reports, I had the second highest peer report. In the third peer report, technically I got peered out. Wow. But the instructors look at it and they said that no, something's not right. And I'll tell you what happened. What happened, the first 2 peer reports, I was helping everybody and their brother pass their patrols. But when it came time for me to lead, I didn't trust my point man. I didn't trust my compass man. I didn't trust this. I didn't trust that. I tried to do it all, and I failed miserably. And I'm so thankful for that. There's this other guy, this pastor that I love listening to, he's a big guy, and he talks about, do you have hurt? Do you have pain? Have you done things that have hurt you so great? Good, he says, because, Noah, Abraham, Moses, King David, Elijah, the Apostle Paul, the Apostle Peter, what a boob. Yeah. And yet it was those things that helped to shape them. And it's just, it's almost a thing that no pain, no gain. And it's true of the body and it's true of the heart.
Yeah, Gary, I think that's a great way to end this. I think you're providing hope for people that will be listening to this, in the sense to know that as long as we fail forward, and that's really what you're talking about, and understanding that you don't ever arrive, that it is a journey, that you might struggle with this duality in your life, but the key to that,
still struggle.
Yeah, that it's still struggling, but there's having that brotherhood, having that battle buddy, having people that you can fellowship with, turn to, so important. So Gary, we got to wrap up the show, but how do people get a hold of you if they want to reach you? Do you have a Twitter feed? Do you have Facebook? How do people reach you?
I do have a Facebook. I think it's Gary Villanueva, or it might be Gary V. I am in LinkedIn, and but my email that anybody can reach out to me is GaryV00. That's GARY V as in Victor 00 at hotmail.com. And I'm from Washington State in the Olympia area. I also do this thing that I call B&B, Bible in a Beverage. So if anyone is in this region area and would love to just, they're just looking for a non-conflicting, place just to meet up. I mean, I love having a beverage and then just sharing some of the trials and tribulations that I've gone through. And there's one last thing that I'd like to shout out to my U.S. Army Special Forces brethren, that remember the motto to our unit, which I believe was set before we were born, and that is "De oppresso liber, free the oppressed." We did it in training, we did it in combat, and I believe that extends to this life in which we are to reach out and help other brethren, and to stay strong in the Lord, and to be the man that God has built. God has those foundations that God has set, and to move forward from there.
That's awesome. Gary, thank you so much for being on the show.
All right, thank you, and Gary V out.